There's no other book in the world that I can so confidently say is my favorite book of all time. Ever since I first read it, True Hallucinations by Terence McKenna quickly became my favorite book, and I consider it a must-read for any psychonaut or fan of both of the McKenna brothers and anyone with a love for mystery and adventure. It's a book full of mystery, adventure, humor, and the kind of high weirdness that you could only expect from Terence McKenna. It's a total page turner that keeps you hooked the entire time, and if you are a fan of Terence McKenna like many psychonauts are, it's a great look into the origin story of how he became who he was and the genesis of a lot of his ideas that we're familiar with now. So if you're a fan of Terence, it's a required reading. The story is told from Terence's perspective as a young, intrepid explorer in his early 20s, right after the tumultuous 60s. He and his brother Dennis had discovered DMT and the ineffable mystery contained in that experience. Things like elf creatures singing impossible objects into existence and self-dribbling jeweled basketballs. Terence saw this mystery as central to his intellectual pursuits, possibly some kind of parallel dimension or an ecology of souls. They dubbed this grand mystery The Secret.
We were fascinated by DMT. As a group, we thought DMT was a more interesting psychedelic than any other psychedelic we'd ever encountered. And in fact, sometimes in my talks, I say it was the most interesting thing we had encountered.
If they could discover and explore what is truly another dimension, this would be the greatest scientific discovery of all time. But there was one major hurdle preventing them from mapping this other dimension. That is, the window of time for a DMT trip is something between 10 and 20 minutes. They needed to find a way to stretch this time window, to keep the portal open, so to speak. And there was one man who was a great inspiration to them who might hold the key to unlocking this mystery, a biologist named Richard Schultes. He was considered the father of ethnobotany, the study of the way that indigenous cultures use plants. And he was also famous for his explorations of the Amazon rainforest and using ayahuasca with these indigenous people, while also documenting the way that they use these plants. In his research, there stood out a paper about a particular tribe in South America called the Witoto.
When we found this paper by Schultes called Verola as an orally administered hallucinogen, we were fascinated because it seemed like this is what we were looking for, this orally active form of DMT. And we thought, well, we should go after this thing.
And they had this orally active form of DMT called ukuhe. With orally active DMT, they could potentially stretch out the experience the way that they were seeking to do. On top of that, in these reports, the Witoto people spoke of seeing these little men. Could these be the same elf-like creatures that Terence experienced in his DMT trips? Now the McKenna brothers were determined to go and seek this out in the Amazon, following in the footsteps of their great hero, Schultes. The adventure of their lives awaited them, so they gathered a motley crew of their hippie friends, a group that they named the Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss, which would make a sick metal band name. Now, I don't want to give you the whole story of the book in this video, but I do want to kind of tell you some of the fun stuff that's inside of it. So let me give you a little taste by reading the summary that's on the back of the book. So it says, "This mesmerizing, surreal account of the bizarre adventures of Terence McKenna, his brother Dennis, and a small band of their friends is a wild ride of exotic experience and scientific inquiry, exploring the Amazon basin in search of mythical shamanic hallucinogens. They encounter a host of unusual characters, including a mushroom, a flying saucer, pirate mantids from outer space, an appearance by James and Nora Joyce in the guise of poultry, and a translinguistic matter, and discover the missing link in the development of human consciousness and language." Like, dude, sign me up. This book is so awesome. Even the chapter names give off an aura of mystery, which just make you wonder what's going to happen. Like, a brush with the other, a violet psychofluid, a conversation over saucers,
We had come to the equatorial jungle to explore the dimensions glimpsed in tryptamine ecstasy, and there, in the darkness of the heart of the Amazon, we had been found and touched by this bizarre and ancient life form that was now awakening to the global potential of a symbiotic relationship with technical humanity.
This is all quintessential Terence McKenna lore, so that's why I would encourage any fans of his to definitely check out this book. Terence McKenna is a masterful and immersive storyteller. That's part of why people love him so much. There's a potency in his words and delivery, which immerses you so deeply in the story that you feel like you're a part of it too. Now, we all think of Terence McKenna and mushrooms like this. This book actually has the first encounter that he ever had with the mushrooms, which initially was just like a fun little recreational side quest for them, while they really pursued the true mystery with Ukuhe. But as the story plays out, the mushroom becomes the main event.
And quickly the mushrooms made it clear that they were the secret. And they very quickly rearranged our priorities. And we realized that, we'd come for the perfect orally active form of DMT. And we thought it was Ukuhe. Actually, it's the mushrooms, and you think of the mushrooms pharmacology, it really is the active ingredient in mushrooms, psilocybin, is converted to psilocin, and psilocin is very, very close to DMT on the molecular basis, and the subjective experiences of high doses of mushrooms are not unlike DMT, very similar. It's the same dimension, essentially, the same place. So we started consuming mushrooms, and they quickly took over the conversation.
The real secret had made itself known. In all the stories in this book, one towers above the rest: the experiment at La Churrera, what Eric Davis once called the mother of all trip reports. I won't explain the experiment here, but let's just say the McKenna brothers were eating mushrooms for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and their sci-fi filled imaginations were taking them to incredible highs. So high, in fact, that they weren't sure if one of them was gonna ever come back down. So you're gonna have to read the book to find out. After reading this story, you realize how formative it was for both of the McKenna brothers. They both went on to pursue totally different paths. Terence became the psychedelic bard that we know him, and Dennis went on to pursue science and helps contribute to our understanding of things like ayahuasca, which goes to show you how sometimes psychedelics can catalyze intellectual pursuits. I highly recommend that you go give this book a read. I have the link for it down below in the description. There also exists an audiobook version of this. The audiobook was recorded 10 years earlier, so it's actually missing some stuff, but I would say read the book first and then do the audiobook. And I promise you that the story's so good that you're not gonna mind hearing it twice. And the audiobook is narrated by Terence McKenna himself, like no one else could. If you enjoy this book, another one that you can read is called The Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss. It's kind of like an autobiography by Dennis McKenna and talks about his life and growing up with Terence and all of their adventures from his perspective. And it gives you really good context, actually, of the things that happen in True Hallucinations, so you know what kind of information diet they had, where they were reading all this sci-fi and all these particular philosophers and things like that. So I would also highly recommend that book. I plan on doing a book review of that one too. So once that's out, that's going to be linked up here on screen. Let me know if you've read this book already and what you think about it. Hit me up in the comments. Feel free to join our Discord server for Find the Others. And thanks for spending some of your precious time with me here on YouTube. Talk to you later.